This is the third in the series of short presentations that crack some of the myths associated with risk management. Managing risk is concerned with improving decision making so that we are more likely to achieve our organisations or our own objectives and goals. It really has no other purpose. And yet, many in the risk management profession seem determined to make what is quite a simple and useful concept into something which is very complex and opaque. This series of presentations seeks to demonstrate how confused and confusing is the way many in the profession explain how we should manage risk. This myth concerns the risk management framework, the foundation of risk management organisation, but that many organisations feel is just a document that can be created and then filed. Some organisations think it's not even worthy of containing intentions or any description of capacity. It just holds the risk rating system. Some organisations think their framework is just the way they do qualitative risk analysis. Apart from having a dependable process for managing risk, organisations also need to express their intentions that this process will be applied to all decision making. And of course, intentions mean nothing unless these are backed up by organisational capacity, such as competency and the relevant resources, and by arrangements that give confidence the process is being applied correctly and consistently. So the framework is this collection of stuff that makes risk management happen in the organisation. It enables the risk management process to be applied to decision making and for risk to be modified as required. It has two parts, both of which are particular to any one organisation. The first is an expression of the organisation's intentions, how it signals what, why and how risk will be managed. These may be policies, statements and other management practices, but quite frankly, it is the attitude and behaviour of management that really signals the organisation's intentions. The what is about, and the why is very much about why risk management is an integral part of decision making and why it contributes to the achievement of value in the organisation. The how is about achieving consistency across the organisation so that we can have meaningful discussions about risk and come to coherent conclusions about the level of risk at any one moment in time. The capacity is the ability the organisation possesses to manage risk that mirrors and matches its intentions. This consists of some tools and devices that enable the people who work in the organisation to manage risk, and most importantly, the capability to use those tools and devices as part of decision making. Just writing them down is not good enough. We need to provide the ability for people to use them and motivate them to use them as part of decision making. And because no organisation is static, and because the external and internal environment changes continuously, therefore its approach to risk management must also continuously adapt and improve, and the framework must contain the means to drive that continuous adaptation and improvement. While it's always a good idea to describe the elements of a framework and how they perform, the risk management framework is not itself a document. This diagram is just one depiction of the architecture of framework that Broadleaf and its consultants use to help its clients manage risk more effectively. It describes the elements, the 4 elements of the framework, and the components of each element. And you'll see first of all that there is a strategic organisational cycle here based on the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle that drives forward continual improvement and continual adaptation and enhancement of risk management. That outer cycle supports at an operational level the application of the risk management process and particularly the application of the risk management process as part of decision making. Let's look at each of those elements in a little bit more detail. The first element is about the organisation expresses in its intentions, and normally this is done through its policies and its delegations of authority. Many organisations have moved on from policy and procedures manuals to setting performance-based requirements for its employees and supporting those requirements by guidelines and procedures that specify best practice. And of course, expressing your intentions without a plan to achieve them is fairly meaningless, so part of the intentions has to be the strategies the organisation intends to adopt for the management of risk and its plans to enhance and advance risk management through the organisation. And finally, it needs assurance that its plans are actually being satisfied, its policies are being followed, and therefore an important part of expressing its intentions is about expressing its intentions in terms of assurance, and the assurance plans do that. The second element of the framework is about establishing credible and coherent capability in the organisation to match the intentions. And I have to say that this is one element of the framework which we generally find is very poor and very weak. There has to be a strategy for training people to use tools, to understand risk. And this has to apply at all levels of the organisation, from the board and oversight body right down to the bottom of the organisation. This is supported by a communication strategy. And of course, the information system is used to support the decisions, to record the outcomes, to track and ensure accountability for risk controls and any outstanding tasks. Decisions on risk are supported by data and the collection and analysis of that data. And organisations now understand that a community of practice of like-minded professionals, a network of risk management champions, if you will, is one of the most effective ways to drive forward continual improvement and best practice across the organisation. The third element of the framework is normally reasonably well done. Establishing a clear oversight body for the management of risk, normally the board or some subordinate committee, and supporting that by an executive or senior management level group. The oversight body clearly is about mandating direction and providing oversight. The leadership group is about leadership, providing resources, and ensuring particularly that the plans are being followed and completed. The leadership group is supported by facilitators. In the past, we used to call these risk managers, but I think we understand nowadays that they manage the risk management process. They manage the framework, they own the framework, and they drive for the continuous improvement. Their role is not to manage risk, it's to help others manage risk more effectively. And they're supported by the champions I talked about before, who act as change agents within their parts of the organisation, and various specialists who specialise in the treatment and understanding of particular forms of risk. And finally, when it comes to accountability, it's very important that people understand the risks for which they're accountable, and particularly the controls which they have to maintain a view of. They have to monitor the key controls. So we'd like to have named individuals for the major risks the organisation faces and the key controls. The fourth box, the fourth element in the framework, is also one, I'm afraid, which is rather weak in many organisations. And because of that, risk management doesn't get better, it doesn't advance, it doesn't adapt as the organisation and its context changes. We're looking here for pretty conventional performance management, continual improvement type tools, having KPIs and performance measures in place that are concerned with the management of risk. Periodically evaluating the effectiveness of the approach to risk management across the organisation. Some people call that maturity evaluation. Benchmarking, both internally and externally, so that we can gain insights on best practice. And then periodically consolidating that information for a review and then revising the whole approach the organisation takes. The revision should at least take place once a year, if only to modify the policy statement and take into account changes in the external and internal environment. Ideally, we should not have the elements of the organisation's system of management badged as risk something. And as you would have seen in the previous diagram, none of the elements or the components of the risk management framework are badged as risk something or other. Managing risk is simply a way of understanding and dealing with the effect of uncertainty on the organisation's objectives in the course of decision making. And if we have separate artifacts labelled in terms of risk or risk management, this tends to externalise or disintegrate the risk management process from decision making. So to manage risk, we actually need access and use most of the elements of a normal management system. We just need to make sure that they reflect the appropriate approach to managing risk. And this is the way we avoid deintegration. This is the way we integrate the management risk very fully into the organisation's approach to management. Oh, and finally, of course, the framework's not a document at all. While it's always a good idea to describe the elements of the framework and how they should perform to help us manage risk, and indeed to lay out some plans and to have those documented, at the end of the day, the framework is the organisation's system of management. It's not a separate document. Thank you very much.